jumped off the wagon. Hello YouTube. Today I'm at the Rhinebeck Aerodrome. It's along the Hudson River in New York, south of Albany, north of New York City. And it's they have the largest collection of still flying antique aircraft that I'm hoping to see down on their airfield. But right now I am just going through their first part of their museum. They've got this building and three big hangars that are separated out. So we're going to go take a look at that and see what we can find. As you may notice, there's a lot of interesting stuff here, including this little V-twin Morgan. Now, wouldn't I love to have that as a toad? I've got sort of a wall of fame. Of course, you got the White brothers and Glenn Curtis, and pioneer women aviators, Matilda Monset and Harriet Quimby. Then you get into World War I, and Eugene Bullard was the first black fighter pilot. Yeah, Eddie Rickenbacker, Fokker, who designed things, Manfred Richthofen. These are guys' names I recognize. Then you get into the Lindbergh era. You got Jimmy Lou Diddle, of course, Charles Lindbergh, Amelia Earhart, Howard Hughes, Wiley Post. It's quite a bit about Lindbergh. And of course his historic solo flight across the Atlantic. And there's a seat similar to what probably was in his plane. And if you complain about your airline seats being uncomfortable, can you imagine flying sitting on this? This one's pretty cool. Sits up pretty high, basically for clearance for that propeller. But this is an original Wilson. It's French from 1908. And this plane was used to test a lot of engines, and it hung in the factory up in the factory ceiling for 60 years. Amazing that they got it here. Now, can you imagine being a gunner in World War I, standing up, so you're shooting over the top of the propeller? And notice, no safety harness. So in a dogfight, you're moving all over the place. That can't be fun or safe. Of course, if you're flying in a bomber and doing high altitude, you need some sort of oxygen. Notice the nose clip. So, and his oxygen would be stored up in that, and up through that hose. There's in use in a guy in a bomber who's a turret gunner. So interesting collection of aviation motors of all types and sizes. I take it back. I don't want the Morgan. I want this. So I go with a sidecar. Got to keep the Penguin. That's pretty cool. You know, you always hear about barn finds and old cars, but this was a barn find of a 1917-18 Thomas Morris S4B Found it in 1954, and then he restored it. Okay, that was just the first building. Like I said, they got 3 hangars out here, and that one we're going to go to first. That's pre-World War I, World War I, and Lindbergh era. This is a 1903 Grout steam car. Love the horn. So they don't have just airplanes here at the Aerodrome. They have all kinds of vehicles. The originator of this said that cars, planes, and motorcycles all grew up together. So he wanted to have them all of that era coming, in one place. If you'd watched my videos from Kitty Hawk, they didn't have one of their planes or a reproduction there, but this is a reproduction that was built by a teacher and the students and the faculty at Augusta Martin High School in Jamaica, New York. And so this is a reproduction of a Wright Flyer with the actual canvas, and if you remember how they flew was by warping the wings to change their shape to be able to turn. This one's a Wright glider. They started out doing gliders while they learned the characteristics of flight before they put an engine on to push them through the air. And if you can see that sign back there, those magnificent men and their flying machines, or how I flew from London to Paris in 25 hours and 11 minutes. That is a very funny movie, and you can see a lot of reproduction antique flying machines, including I believe, one of the damsel, the little lightweight French one. Now, if you want a light aircraft, the Damsel from France in 1909, Santos Dumont was a Brazilian. He made this and first officially observed flight in history, a flight of 722 feet in 1906. And this is very, very light. It's bamboo wrapped with brass wire and got some stiffeners of steel. Weighs only, what was it, 315 pounds, so very light aircraft. So this is the World War I era, and quite a few examples of planes from that era. It's a Fokker from 1915. This is the machine gun up here. Would have been interesting. I'm not sure how they figured out how not to shoot the propeller. Having grown up with Wonderful World of Disney, I do remember an episode about the history of flight and how they first put the machine guns, shot the propellers off, then worked out a way for, as the propeller went around, the machine gun would skip when the blade was coming in range of it. Pretty funny presentation. I believe it was Donald Duck that crashed a lot of planes, but I'm not sure if that's still out there somewhere. This is from the Wonderful World of Disney, History of Flight. Of course, when you think of the Red Baron von Richthofen, you always think of him in his red painted Fokker triplane. His three wings, excellent maneuverability, high rate of climb. He's also known to break up in the air and was drawn from operations, but the aircraft drawings from several sources, one of which drawings made by the British from a captured one. These were built, no known originals exist, so this is just a copy. So this one is a Morand Solner N from 1914, and this was the first one that basically is considered to be, by many, the granddaddy of modern fighter planes. And the N was the first to carry a forward-firing machine gun, and they put steel plates on the propeller to deflect bullets that hit it. I can imagine the first time somebody went up and fired a machine gun with just plain old wooden propellers and found themselves with no power or the engine tearing itself apart. Sort of interesting is that Ivan Smirnov of the Imperial Russian Army used a boat anchor on a rope trailing behind him, one of these planes, to rip the wings off of the enemy aircraft. Can't imagine that. Now that one up there hanging upside down, that's interesting, is a Pigeon Fraser, and they know it was March of 1917. It was an experimental aircraft. The whole tail section moved up and down and side to side for control. The first one that they built tore itself apart in static testing. The second one crashed on a test flight, and this one was unfinished when the government canceled the contract. They decided it just wasn't feasible. So this one is the only one to exist, and it's amazing that it somehow ended up here. So now I'm in the third building, which was the Lindbergh era, or the golden age of flight. So in 1937, this plane cost $10,000 and was actually a gift from a New York stockbroker to his wife. It's a Fairchild 24. Along with the planes, like I mentioned, that they do have other vehicles, and there's a nice Ford. And I'm not sure what this one is. I can't get in there to read the emblems, but would have been chauffeur up front, sitting in the back. You got the glass partition, and I found it interesting is the speedometer goes up to 120 miles an hour. Now, if that's just a way of advertising, sort of a gimmick that this can go 120 miles an hour, or if it actually could, I don't know. Not sure I'd want to do 120 in this. On the other side of the road from the museum and those three hangars that we went into is the actual airfield and the 20 antique aircraft that are worthy or airworthy. And they do fly them on weekends starting in mid-June, I believe. And you can come down here and watch the air shows. They do some tricky maneuvers and whatnot. But we can take a look at what they've got here. And I don't know if they're labeled so much as being able to just see him. Here's an old Curtiss. I tell that by the radiator. tail on this one just looks so much like the tail of a bird. If you were to come here on the weekends, for a fee, you could take a ride in an antique plane. So, might be an interesting experience. Oh look, there's Snoopy and his Sopwith camel. Looks like they've got a 1917 Fokker triplane that they fly in their air shows. Betcha it's the Black Baron that flies this one. I'm on the edge of the airstrip, and they've got a pretend town or whatever over there. There are a lot of seats here, a lot of bench seats. You can see behind me, there's some over here behind the camera, and they do put on air shows, I think I mentioned, starting mid-June, and a lot of the 20 airplanes that are still flight worthy, which is the largest collection of them in the world, or at least in this country, a lot of them fly during those air shows. Only cost me $8 to get in. That's the seniors, military, and children. That is $8. I think it's $12 if children under 6 are free. So it's a pretty good deal if you happen to be in the area in June and the weather's nice. Come on over, check out the air show. In any case, oh, and there is a replica of the Spirit of St. Louis here, and that flies every weekend, weather permitting, of course. So I'm going to get on the road and see what else I can find, and see you later, YouTube. I'd like to take a moment to thank my patrons on Patreon who have helped me defray the costs of admission to here. If you would like to become one of those patrons, there is a link below to Patreon. For as little as $1 a month, you can help me keep up with the videos and admissions to places as cool as the old Rhinebeck Aerodrome. Again, thank you.